the very essence of it was get Flynn to get Trump. We got to get Flynn out of the way. And I say this very publicly and very matter-of-factly. 5 January 2017 was the day the coup began in the United States of America. And that coup was initiated by Barack Obama, the President of the United States, sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office against President Trump.
But before we get into our conversation, my name's Eric Metaxas, and this channel exists to bring you a biblical perspective on today's news, culture, and hot-button issues. If you're new here or not, welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified when new videos get posted. You were a Democrat. You were in the military. You love your country. And at some point, talk about, the job you're given in the Obama administration. And when you begin to actually do that job, they think, uh-oh, no, we don't want that.
Yeah, for people that don't know, I spent 33 years in the military, actually just over 33 years. I was twice appointed by Barack Obama, by President Obama. And one of the critical jobs that I was appointed into was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is one of the largest intel agencies in the world and certainly in the United States intelligence community. And as you just highlighted, Eric, and for your audience, I grew up in a Democrat family. We kind of refer to ourselves as Kennedy Democrats. My father was a World War II and a Korean War vet. He retired as a sergeant from the Army. So we grew up in a kind of an old school Democrat household, and in the era of the 60s and 70s, and frankly, I was a Democrat all through my time in the military, and to a degree, I had an extraordinary, blessed career in the military, particularly in combat operations, where I was, very instrumental in going after many of our enemies that we faced, particularly in the war on terror. And so, I was good at being a soldier, and I was recognized for that, at very senior levels. And so Barack Obama, appointed me to be the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I got crosswise initially with his administration, and Jim Clapper was the director of national intelligence. John Brennan was the director of the CIA. Jim Comey, all these names, right? Jim Comey was director of the FBI. Where I got crosswise with the administration was they wanted a particular narrative about the war on terrorism, particularly the war on Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And my responsibility as a senior intelligence officer running one of the largest intel agencies in the world is basically to tell the truth, right? To tell the truth as I saw it. And I spent 5 years of my life in combat operations fighting these guys. And so our assessment was that we were not winning the war against ISIS, that ISIS was actually growing around the world. And at the time, they were in like 24 or 25 countries. I bring this out in the movie. I bring a lot of this out in the movie, actually, and more about this idea of endless wars. And so I ran crosswise with the administration and their narrative. And as a military officer, you cannot, I'm not a political appointee, right? I'm a military officer appointed into a very challenging position, and a position that I was very honored and felt very well prepared for. But I got crosswise with the administration's narrative, and the narrative that they wanted was not something that was the truth. And when I was asked to testify in front of Congress with a very famous cadre of other people, those that I just mentioned, Clapper, Brennan, Comey, in a very famous hearing, when I was asked, they were all asked what was going on. When they were all asked about the war against ISIS, they said we're winning. And when it came to me, I was the last person asked in that lineup. And I was asked by the senators, and they asked me, and I said, no, we're not winning. ISIS is actually growing. And pretty much immediately after that, I was called into a room and told that I needed to resign from that position.
What year was that?
That was 2014.
Okay.
It was 2000. It was winter of 2014. I ended up retiring in late that summer. My last month in DIA was August, and I ended up retiring in September of 2014. one tidbit about all that, one of the things that happened to me at the end of that, at my retirement, one of the nice ceremonies that I was brought into. So I was brought into the FBI headquarters, and Jim Comey, the director of the FBI at the time, actually presented me with one of the highest, in fact, the highest medal that can be given to somebody outside of the FBI, and it's called the Director's Award. It's actually a beautiful award. I was presented to it for my work with the FBI during many, many years of combat operations and intelligence work that I had done pretty much for the second half of my career. I worked with the FBI very closely. So here is Jim Comey presenting me this nice award, and then roughly a year later, they have me under investigation, the FBI and the Department of Justice and the Obama administration, which is mind-blowing when you think about, that little detail. And then a year plus later, They got me under investigation.
Just a couple questions. So why, when you testified in 2014, Clapper, Comey, Brennan, they are going along with a certain narrative. Now, we now know that they're willing to sell their souls to the devil, that they've sold their souls to the devil for something. I don't know what they get out of it. I'm sure it's not a good deal, but they thought it was a good deal to go along with a narrative which you knew was false.
Absolutely.
Why would they be willing to go along with that narrative? Did they actually believe that narrative? Why were they pushing that narrative? That's the real question. Why were they pushing the narrative which you knew to be a lie?
Yeah, because of the Obama administration, and Obama in particular, this is all about power. So the bottom line of all of it, the answer to why is about power. Power. People go, power and money. Well, with power can come great wealth, right? So it's all about power. The reason why is because the administration, led by Barack Obama and Susan Rice and others that were in the administration at the time, they were John Kerry as the Secretary of State. The message around the world was that Barack Obama was going to be this champion against this ISIS, this threat of ISIS that was clearly growing around the world. And I'm not, and I talk about in the movie from West Africa all the way over to Indonesia, but it was also starting to rise up in Europe quite a bit. And this is 2014 now. Okay, so now we start to look at where we are with this threat today, and it's all over the world now. I mean, we have it in the streets of America. So the narrative was to say that ISIS was on the run. It was that we were winning. That's what they wanted. And my thing was, well, we're not winning. What's happening is that ISIS is actually growing, and they're growing stronger. They're growing in different parts of the world. And they're also growing in not only in Europe at the time, but they started to emerge here in America. And so the only thing that I can put my finger on is that at the time, this is 2014 now, and they're getting ready to go into a very crucial set of the next couple of years, right? The next year and a half, we're getting ready to go into another presidential election, which really, for them, and the heir apparent at the time, and I knew this back in 2014, the heir apparent for the next administration post Barack Obama was going to be Hillary Clinton, despite all of the other people that got in the race, like, Bernie Sanders and all the different other political folks that ran in the Democrat primary. But they knew at the time, and everybody talked about it while I was still in government, while I was still in the military. I was in a lot of these conversations where Hillary Clinton was going to be the heir apparent to Barack Obama.
But so the key, just to be clear here, correct me if I'm wrong, the people that we've mentioned were willing to lie to Congress. They knew what they're saying is not true. For political reasons, they lied to Congress. You talk about despicable, because you lie to Congress, you're lying to the American people. This is set up so that we have checks and balances. They were willing to lie to Congress for Barack Obama and for Hillary Clinton. You were not willing to do that because you weren't willing to do that. They came after you with everything they had. We'll be right back to get the details. Go to flynnmovie.com. TBN.com. We'll be right back with General Flynn. What you just said, because a lot of times we talk around things.
Right.
Clapper, Comey, and Brennan, unless I'm missing something, are willing to go before the American people, before the Congress,
And lie.
And lie. They know something's not true, but for power, for the sake of power, they're willing to lie. And you were not willing to lie, and for telling the truth respectfully, you were vilified, persecuted horribly. I guess my question is it their assumption, is this the way it works, that they just think, like, well, everybody's going to play ball? That's that's what it's called, right? Where you're gonna play ball. You're gonna lie. You're gonna do what you're told. You're gonna push the narrative we tell you to push. And they figured, you're right in there. You're a Democrat. You're gonna go along with this for whatever purposes. But you have a conscience, and you knew that I cannot do this. But when you spoke the truth, was there a way that you were thinking, maybe I hedged my bets, or maybe, what made you feel that you must tell the truth the way you did? Because you've paid a tremendous price.
Yeah, because that's the right thing to do. I'm a soldier at heart, and I spent a lot of time in combat. I spent a lot of time in really tough units, in a lot of difficult times. And you can't but tell the truth, because it's all about saving lives and protecting this country and doing the right thing. I'm designed that way. Like it or not, naive or not, I'm designed that way. And I was raised that way as a kid. And I learned that, again, while I was serving in the military, the narrative, and actually, and I talk about this in the movie, and I'll share this part about it. My congressional affairs officer, his name was Cal Temple, great guy. Cal Temple came to me the night before I was going to go testify, and he had my statement, right? He had my statement that was on a document, and it had all kinds of red lines and stuff that had been seen by the White House and been seen by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and they had written out a bunch of stuff. They had redlined out a bunch of stuff, and they said, "This is what we want you to give." And I read it. I sat there, and I could not believe what I was reading. And essentially, I said to Cal, he and I were sitting there. This is the night before I'm going to testify the next day, and these testimonials are big deals. These are in front of the American people, and these are captured documents that are on record. And I said to Cal, and who was a great guy, I said, "Cal, I go, this is insane. I go, I'm not going to say this. This is not true. This is not right." And I said, "I'm not going to do it." I told him to go reprint my statement that I had approved. And I said, "That's the statement that I want to turn into Congress that next morning. And that's the statement that I'm going to give. And that's what I'm going to stick to, because it was the truth." And when I did that, maybe I was, kissing my career goodbye. But see, that's when you get to a certain level in the military, especially when you're honored to be selected as a general officer or an admiral in the Navy, a general in the Army or the Marine Corps. These are big, responsible positions. And then when you're put into a position of the head of one of the largest intel agencies in the world, if you're prone to lying, then you are doing a massive disservice, and you're dishonoring every single, airman, sailor, soldier, Marine that ever gave their life for this country. So I could not do that. Again, call me naive to think in the political environment that I was in that I was going to be able to get away with that. It didn't matter to me. I didn't think about that, Eric. What I thought about was when asked a question, tell the truth. When asked to put your assessment forward, make sure it's the best, you're in your best judgment with all of the resources that I had at my sort of beck and call as the head of an intel agency. And it was a very, very solid, and it was a correct narrative. It was the narrative that was actually true for all across the whole of the intelligence community. What the others did, Clapper, Comey, and Brennan, they sat there and they lied in front of the American people. They lied to Congress, and they told a false narrative. And like I say in the movie, what that meant then was that, and because I was out. As soon as I did that, a couple of days later, I got called into a meeting, and I'm told, "You're leaving." I ended up, sticking around for a few more months to sort of finish my time up, and I was out. But what that meant for the bigger picture was that we had another 6.5 years of fighting and dying based on a false narrative that the Obama administration wanted to carry through. And to me, it's just I die a little bit every time I think about soldiers who are going off to war for reasons that they don't totally understand, and for people who don't care about them, and working for people, in this case, the political people who have some other ambition in mind, and that's the ambition to stay in power at all costs, even at the cost of soldiers' lives on the battlefield.
So you basically sacrifice your career. But listen, how many patriots sacrifice their lives? You sacrifice your career. You know it's the right thing to do. And there are many people that understand, I got to do the right thing, whatever the cost is. And whether you are explicitly trusting God or implicitly, the point is you're trusting that telling the truth is the right thing. And somehow I have no other options. And whatever price I pay, that's fine. I'm going to pay that price. Others have paid the price. So you pay that price. When Barack Obama is meeting with Donald Trump, so this is after Hillary Clinton loses the election. Oh, yeah, she lost. When that happened, Obama says to President Trump, really foolishly, I mean, the idea that Trump is going to listen to Obama, but warns Trump against you. Now, I remember, what day was that? Was that the day of the inaugural? I can't remember when that was.
No, that was actually, it was about 3 days after the election, where right. Trump went and met with Obama to do a transition of the government.
Okay,
so
somehow, and I just find this stuff fascinating, that why would Obama be foolish enough to think that Donald Trump is such an idiot that he's going to take Obama's advice? I mean, it's amazing. But Obama nonetheless tries to demonize you in that meeting with Donald Trump. Now, we know today that there are many people around Trump that he naively allowed around him who did not have his best interests, the best interests of truth and America at heart. So those people were around him. But so President Obama actually says to Trump, be careful, you are bad news. General Flynn is bad news. So what does Trump do when he gets this delightful piece of intelligence?
So, I mean, you can't make this up. I mean, this is just unreal. It was written up about by all kinds of newspapers. The media jumped on it. That Barack Obama tells Trump, pay attention to two people. One of them is Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. The other is General Mike Flynn. And he directly tells Trump, do not hire Mike Flynn to come into your cabinet or, in any position at all, which is amazing. And all of so that conversation between those two actually happened almost more than a month before the very famous Russia phone call that I had with the Russian ambassador, right? I mean, so it happened even before that occurred. So these people knew they had something planned for Trump and me, basically. So Trump comes back to a meeting with me afterwards. After that meeting, he and I met, and I go in there and I talk to Trump, and Trump tells me this conversation that he had with Obama, and he asked me, "What do you think about that?" And I said to him, I've never met the guy, and which I talk about in the movie, and so I'm spilling a little bit of the beans from the movie. I said, I never met the guy. I never met, in my time in government, in my time in these very key positions that Barack Obama appointed me in, I never met with Barack Obama. And so the guy, for him to say something about me in the regards of not hiring somebody, telling a duly elected president of the United States, in this case, Donald J. Trump, to not hire somebody? I mean, how dare he? And I had spent, months and months and months with Trump on a daily basis, traveling with him, and we had gotten to know each other. And so I said, I never met the guy. And I said, and one of the things that Trump comes back to me on, and during that meeting, is he says, he goes, I don't trust him. It's what he told me about Barack Obama. And we kind of had a little bit of a chuckle about it at the time. But And then of course, Trump then asked me to be his national security advisor, at that moment, really. And we took some photos and stuff. But, you just can't make this stuff up. And then you fast forward, into January of 2017. So that was roughly mid-November, early November of 2016. You go to 5 January of 2017, and there's a very, very famous meeting. It's well documented now, and it's evidence that we fought for in my case. We fought for this exculpatory evidence. And in that meeting was Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Jim Clapper, Brennan, Susan Rice, Sally Yates, Jim Comey, and a couple of other minions that are staffers that were in that very famous 5 January 2017 meeting where they talked about two things. One was we've got to get Flynn out of the way immediately. And number two, once we get Flynn out of the way, then we can go after Trump. Okay? We know that now for a fact. And
now, I've not heard this. I mean, that's extraordinary. How do we know about that meeting? Where is that?
Because, well, number one, the meeting itself occurred. We didn't know what the essence of it was until we started to fight back. So when I started to fight back in my case, and a lot of people, all they know is Flynn pled guilty and he had to be pardoned. Actually, I pled guilty for a very specific reason, basically to protect my son. And then at a certain point in time, when evidence started to come out, when we started to see text messages and all kinds of stuff that people were fighting for, my wife and I made the decision to pull my guilty plea. Once we pulled my guilty plea and we started to fight, we started to dig into the Department of Justice. We started to get evidence, and we got evidence of this very famous meeting. Well, this very famous meeting, 5 January 2017, was also at the center of the Durham report. Okay, so anybody that goes back and reads the 350 to 400 pages of the Durham report, this meeting is addressed in there. Evidence that we pulled out of that meeting, from my case, actually talked about what the goals were in that meeting, what they talked about in that meeting. Essentially, the very essence of it was get Flynn to get Trump. We got to get Flynn out of the way. So that meeting was really about figuring out a way to get Mike Flynn out of the National Security Advisor's office position and then go after him, partly as a way to get to Donald Trump, because they did try to do the 25th Amendment on Trump later on in the first really quarter of his presidency. I mean, that meeting, 5 January 2017, to me, and I say this very, very publicly and very matter-of-factly, 5 January 2017 was the day the coup began in the United States of America. Folks. And that coup was initiated by Barack Obama, the President of the United States, sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office against President Trump.
So, General Flynn, what we're talking about is a level of evil in our time. It is a staggering thing.
Yep.
The deep state, people who are at war with we the people. They're at war with the American founders' vision that we the people are the government. They control things. And even on January 5th, on the eve of the inauguration of Donald Trump, they are planning how to stay in power. Number one, get rid of you, and that clears the way to get rid of Trump. And that's basically exactly what they did. I mean, that's exactly what they did. I mean, literally the next morning, I had the privilege of being in the church across from the White House at this service before the inauguration. I had the privilege of sitting next to you. I'll never forget it. And I was so excited about what this boded for the future of our country, taking our country back. I'm sitting next to you. Little did we know, either of us at the time, what was being planned. So when does it happen? And in the film, you single out Mike Pence, the vice president, as being a key figure in getting rid of you. We've already heard that the idea of getting rid of you is to get rid of Trump. How does he figure? Because this is horrifying to hear, but it's true. How did he figure into that?
Yeah, so Mike Pence was brought into the Trump circle as a key establishment figure, long in the tooth political guy, tied directly to the Republican establishment in Washington, D.C., had been a congressman, had been a governor, was the quote unquote evangelical Christian that Trump needed by his side to get the evangelical vote in this country. And Mike Pence was brought in to basically keep Trump in line. That was really to me. And now I think, as we have seen, and so how did Mike Pence? How did it relate to me? So I was very close to Trump. I got very close to Trump from really the spring, actually from the summer of 2015 when we first met, all the way through the convention. I was looked at to be vice president along with three other candidates, Christie, Newt Gingrich, and Mike Pence, in the run up to the convention. I was vetted for that position, and then I continued to ride with Trump all the way through the election, and Trump had a lot of respect for me. Trump and I got along really well. We became friends. And so what began to happen is they needed, the establishment, the Obama administration particularly, but the establishment, the Washington, D.C. uniparty establishment, they needed to get a guy like me out of the way. And Mike Pence and Reince Priebus was the other one that I call out in the movie. They were the tools that were used. And as we highlight in the movie, the people, not only Pence himself, but also people in Pence's office who absolutely hated Trump, that were brought in to the administration not only during the transition to the inauguration in January of 2017, but into the White House. So there were people that in the vice president's office, to include the vice president himself, who didn't care much for Trump at all. There were people inside on his team that, absolutely, and I use this word precisely, hated Trump. And we knew that. So in Pence's case, Pence did not like the relationship that I had with Trump, and there were others like Paul Ryan, believe me, Mitch McConnell. The establishment wanted to get rid of these people that weren't part of, that weren't these corruptible individuals, right? Like it or not. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm a perfect guy, but and neither is Trump. I used to introduce him as an imperfect guy, but we're not corruptible. We're not corruptible. We are incorruptible when it comes to this kind of stuff and this nonsense. And these are people that care more about their power than they do about this country.
I mean, it's one thing, most of us know Mitch McConnell is a bum. Most of us know that there are these establishment Republicans that they're bums. They have no, if you see the film Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, you can see this is what we're dealing with. They're always going to be people that they will sell their souls for power. But when you mention that Mike Pence went along with this is grievous to a lot of people, because I think, it's one thing to disagree with somebody, but when we realize is that the fix was in, that these people had put their people around Trump in order to get rid of you so that they could get rid of him, it's very, very ugly. So obviously what happened with you was this lie. This starts this whole Russia collusion, this whole hoax that, here's the narrative we're going to go with. Donald Trump's team is working with Russia. I mean, it's so stupid that it would be comedy, except they pushed this harder than anyone has ever pushed anything in our nation, this lie. And they pushed it for years. And your utterly innocent conversation with a Russian ambassador was exhibit A for them to push the lie.
Yeah. And in the movie, we actually show the actual transcripts of the conversations that I had with the Russian ambassador, so people can go there. One of the other things too, and I'll bring it up here, 'cause we did talk about this in other parts of our filming when we filmed this movie. It just didn't. This piece didn't make it in, but I'll bring it up on your show. The agent, the lead agent for Crossfire Hurricane, which was the name of the entire Russiagate thing, right? His name was Barnett, and Barnett, Barnett, and people can go look up Barnett, FBI agent, 302, and it's online. You can go find it. It's in September of 2020. So I'm jumping a little bit ahead in terms of a timeline. But Agent Barnett, it's roughly a 9-page 302, a 9-page deposition. He actually talks about the idea of get Flynn to get Trump. in September of 2020 is when he brings that up. Now, this is a guy that was picking me up every single day as the lead agent for Crossfire Hurricane when I was quote unquote cooperating with the government, to figure something out, right? I mean, because I said I'll cooperate, right? I mean, I don't know what I was cooperating on because because I did decide to plead guilty because I did it in order to protect my son, period. So the egregiousness of what we're talking about and the lies that were perpetrated against the American people, and now what we see is what we see happening to President Trump. I mean, this is a continuation of that meeting on the 5th of January, 2017, that was led by Barack Obama. This is a continuation of this. You can call it a revolution, a color revolution. I don't care what you call it. It is a coup against the United States of America, against the people of the United States of America, by the Obama administration and by President Obama himself, with his vice president at the time, Joe Biden, who is now the president, against the Trump administration, and to keep Trump from being able to stay in power or to come back into power as president of the United States. And it's all designed to continue to control the levers of power within our government. It's so bad. And so I could have gone away from all this. I could have walked away from this, Eric, and to your great audience. I could have walked away from all of this. I could have retired out of the military, but I felt so compelled because I saw, I'm a guy who studies a lot of things, and I saw what was happening. I just didn't realize the depth of corruption in our government. I frankly did not. I did not know it was going to be this bad when I walked into the White House. And I find out when I walk into the White House, oh my God. And then, of course, everything unravels for me. And I find myself in this situation, and I had to fight tooth and nail to get out of it, and where my case was eventually dismissed. And then a judge grabs a hold of me, and all this we talk about in the film itself. But what I want people, and I want your audience to understand, is that we have a responsibility as senior military leaders in this country to tell the truth. Period. You don't go and tell a political narrative, because if you do, it's going to cost the lives of the great men and women who serve our country on. And I'm a student of history as well, so I've studied our wars. I know what the sacrifices have been, for many, many years in our country's storied history of people who have given the ultimate measure of devotion in the cause of freedom. And here we are, and we're now fighting to retain that freedom. We are fighting for this freedom back. I mean, it's undeniable what it is that we're facing, and frankly, sadly, in a guy like me who never thought that I was going to be at the fulcrum of history, because of having a great military career and growing up as a kid in a really a poor Irish family, and I got to the level I got to, and then all of a sudden I find myself in this position. I'm like, so my bottom line is that this is evil. We are facing evil. And one thing about the long arc of history is that good always prevails. But it takes champions, it takes leadership, it takes, a grit that only the American people have. And in order for us to continue to have this beautiful experiment in democracy called a constitutional republic, the United States of America, we're going to have to get ourselves, out of bed a little bit earlier every morning now, as we go into this final, whatever it is, 150 days or so to November 5th. And we're going to have to be involved at every single level in order to win this country back. And once we win this country back, then even more work is cut out. The work then begins again.
Well, you and I were talking about this when we were together in Georgia, that Trump has to win, and the left will do literally anything. They would really love to put a bullet in his head, but they're not going to be able to do that. But they might try. They'll do anything. They'll start World War III. They will do anything because they do not care whether people die, whether the country goes under. They just want power. That's all they care about. And so and I know they can and will do anything to prevent him getting back in. But if he does get back in, by the grace of God, that's the starting line. We have a lot of work to do. Do you have a sense, because we just got a minute or so left, do you have a sense that Trump, if he gets in, knows what is at stake and will put the right people in place to gut this deep state?
Yeah, yes, I do have a sense, and I do believe that he has learned an awful lot. I mean, an awful lot, and I know that that he realizes that the people that he brings into his inner circle, going back into the White House, have to be really dedicated patriots who have not only his objectives and what he wants to accomplish, but are also people who are prepared and ready to do the necessary functions of government and to hold people accountable. I mean, we have to have one standard of justice in this country, and people are going to need to be held accountable. And we're going to have to run this government and the functions of government so to get us back up to being that true North Star, that beacon of light for the rest of the world, and frankly for the American people to see as hope and to be inspired by it. That's what we need right now, because the way the country is going, I mean, people feel, and it's undeniable what is happening to our country. So yeah, Trump realizes it. He knows what he's got to do, and he's fully prepared to do it.
And the question is, ladies and gentlemen in this audience, what are you going to do? There are little things you can do. There are big things you can do. One thing I beg you to do, see this film, share it with your friends, FlynnMovie.com. We've got to get the word out. Americans need to understand what has happened. If you don't know what happened, you can't be part of the solution. General Flynn, a great honor to have you. God bless you.
Thank you, Eric, so much. God bless to you and your great, great audience. Thank you.